Good morning. Wonderful to be here. I love coming to Chile. I came, as Queremos said, I think 2 years ago, and fell in love with the people and the country, and just excited to be able to be here with you today. So I'm going to walk through some of my journey and my research around purpose, but the most exciting part of today is not me. It's going to be the conversations you're going to have together. I think one of the things about purpose is that we all know all the answers about purpose. You don't need me up here talking. We all know. It's a question of having the opportunity to ask the questions of yourself so that you can find the truth inside you. I think that's one of the wonderful things about this kind of work is that we all know this. We just don't often ask the questions of ourselves to be able to bring it out and to live it in our lives. All right. That's me. As Carolina said, my last venture before Imperative was called the Taproot Foundation. And the Taproot Foundation was an organization, and it is an organization that gets business professionals like yourselves to not only do their jobs, but to actually donate 5 hours a week to help nonprofits, NGOs that need help. Because nonprofit organizations, they do incredible work, but they don't have HR executives like you. They don't have marketing executives. They don't have tech executives, and yet they're doing some of the most important work in the world. And without the talent in this room, they're not able to actually achieve their goals. So we built this organization 2001, right after 9/11, and grew it to 9 offices, and ultimately it became the largest nonprofit consulting firm in the world. But we realized that that wasn't big enough because there was so much more need. So we sort of switched and moved into a strategy of building a marketplace more broadly, and worked with the White House to build a $15 billion a year market for pro bono services in the US, and then worked with BMW to expand to 30 countries around the world. And it was this truly amazing experience of working with the best in business, government, NGOs all around the world to really help instill this pro bono ethic in business community. What we found of the tens of thousands of volunteers who are donating their time is this is what they said. I find the pro bono work much more rewarding than my job, my salaried job. And at first we were excited. We're like, we crushed it, we did it, we created this like incredible experience. We created Disneyland for work, yeah? But the problem with Disneyland is that with the exception of a few creepy people, everyone goes home at the end of the day, yeah? And it's the same thing with work. Like, it's not enough just to have something on the side. What we found is that volunteering was like a vitamin or a supplement, so you could get your nutrition and then eat at McDonald's during the day. And we're like, that's not the solution to this problem. The solution is we gotta figure out how to eat a healthy meal, not eat McDonald's and then take vitamins. And I really shifted my focus to say, it's not about volunteering, that's important. We've got to fix work itself. Work is broken, it's not serving us if we feel like we need to take supplements on the side. We need to figure out how to address work itself. And it wasn't surprising. When we started doing research, we found 66% of the US workforce is unfulfilled at work. They're not getting that meaning that they need from their work. So it's no surprise they then are looking to stray from their work and do pro bono work because their needs are not getting met in their core. And we know also from Gallup, 85% of people, I think globally, are dissatisfied with their jobs. So we're failing as leaders to create work, create an environment to equip people to actually be fulfilled in their work. And I think that's the greatest opportunity of our generation, is to figure out how to address this, because I believe this is at the core of just about every economic, social, and environmental problem in the world, is that when people are so dissatisfied, unfulfilled, they're not fully showing up in the world, they're not living their values, they're not bringing their full selves to their families, etc. And if we can fix this, I really think it creates the wave of change. And the people in this room represent so many people in Chile. When you think about all the people that you touch, the people in this room alone can change this issue for this country. Like just the people in this room. It's an incredible opportunity. So when I started doing this work, I'm research oriented. I think purpose has been talked about by rabbis and priests. It's been talked about by coaches and consultants, and everyone's trying to sell purpose and they make it whatever it is. And I'm like, I don't buy it. I want to understand actually like what is the science behind this? What does the research show? But there's very little research at the time about purpose, because it had existed mostly in the spiritual and sort of coaching world. It hadn't operated yet in a deeper level. So we started with New York University and did the first American-wide study of purpose. We then worked with LinkedIn and did a global study of their members around, I think it was like 40 countries. And we also studied universities, understanding students and what were their expectations and how were they showing up at school and what did that show about where they were going. We worked with PwC to do a study on companies that do this well. What are they doing that's different from companies that aren't? We then, in 2019, looked at sort of the pathways of individuals and what separated people who did this well from people who didn't do it well at the individual level. And then finally, in 2022, before I left Imperative, we really focused on relationships because we found relationships were the key to all of this. And it was also as the pandemic was starting, and we were realizing like people need connection, people are feeling isolated. So this is the key unlock. The key sort of realization we had. When people are aware of their purpose, 63% are fulfilled. When you don't know what your purpose is, and it's not that you know the exact words, it's that you have a general sense for what is meaningful to you, you're not fulfilled. This is such an easy thing to address. It's just helping people have a map so that when they're driving, they know where they're going. Because otherwise, they're just driving all over the place. And like sometimes they make it to the destination, but most of the time, they just are wandering around on the road. And this, I think, is one of the biggest and simplest and lowest cost interventions like ever, of just simply enabling people to understand what their purpose is so that they can take ownership and navigate their career, and so that they can create meaning. So in the US, most of my work's been in the US. I've helped about 500,000 people discover their purpose, have clarity around their purpose. And we've worked with companies from Starbucks, Amazon, Deloitte, PwC, Hasbro, Disney. All of Disney has done work with all of Disney, including Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker, and Yoda. Yoda was awesome. Loved working with Yoda. Very, very wise little guy. So really in a lot of different contexts, sort of seeing it in the US, like this is, especially for the next generation, it's a huge part of what they want as a way of navigating their career. Especially today when people are changing careers so often, and there's gonna be more and more acceleration of that, you can't tie your identity to I am a accountant, I am an engineer, because that could change in 3 to 4 years. You need an identity tied to your purpose so that you can have the flexibility to be able to adapt over time. So what is this purpose thing of which we speak? I'm going to talk a little bit about what we found. And the most important thing we found was that most people are tied to myths that have been told by religion and told by coaches and told by people who have sort of not used the science behind this. And those things are actually getting in the way of us finding meaning. And I should say the biggest culprit is probably Hollywood. Hollywood tells stories about purpose that are great for a movie, but they actually leave us unhappy because we're not in the movies. And it's not actually based on science. So a lot of what I'm trying to do is help people unlearn. Because I already said, you already know all this, but you have been taught a lot of things that are actually getting in your way of being able to live and work with purpose. So I'm going to talk through 4 myths about purpose. The first myth is that purpose is a cause. So when I was working at Taproot, I would get executives like yourselves all the time coming to me and saying, can I have an informational mentoring interview? And I'd say, sure. They'd say, I'm so unsatisfied, I'm unfulfilled at work. I'm going to go quit my job at IBM, and I'm going to go work at a nonprofit. I was like, okay. So they'd go and they'd do that. And then 6 months later, they'd call and say, I'm just as unhappy, and I'm paid half as much, right? We also, in the NYU study, what we found was there was no profession where over 50% of people were fulfilled. So many people would be like, oh, well, you're a doctor, so like that's fulfilling. I'm an accountant, like I'm not gonna be fulfilled. The majority of people in healthcare, unfulfilled. Majority of people in NGOs, unfulfilled. Education, unfulfilled. And yet we found people in jobs where they had no right to be fulfilled who were fulfilled, right? Because this is so important, because we are actually the ones that create meaning out of our jobs. It's not the job itself. And we tend to always think, oh, it's just better if I went to this job, or this kind of career path is the one that's going to enable fulfillment because anyone who's a doctor is fulfilled. Yeah? It's such a prevalent myth, and it is so problematic, especially for younger people who think that this is the choice they need to make. Which ties to this piece, like only some jobs are meaningful. We have yet to find a job type where people can't find meaning. And the most extreme example of this is Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. He was a slave in a concentration camp, and he found meaning. How many people have worse jobs than that, right? So this whole idea that it's like up to the job to provide the meaning is not accurate. Certainly some jobs, some environments make it a hell of a lot easier, but we've got to stop sort of assuming that only some jobs can create meaning and other ones don't. This is a major myth that people have and that executives use all the time, not in a mean way, but they just don't know better. There's a story that, well, a job is a job. Some people don't have the money, some people just need a job, and they get meaning from their family, they get it from church, they get it from playing football. There's so many other ways outside of work that they can be fulfilled. Work's job is not to fulfill people, it's to pay people, right? Very common, and then it's okay to make work terrible because the role of work is not anything other than just a paycheck. So it creates a story that makes it okay to make work subhuman, yeah? What we found in our research was of the people who are fulfilled. So someone who's working and they say, I am fulfilled, right? Only 1% of them were unfulfilled at work. So what that means statistically is basically, if you are unfulfilled, you're unfulfilled. Because it's a mindset, it's not about the environment as much, right? So it's a fundamental mindset because the way we create meaning, the way we create fulfillment is through reflection. And reflection is the only way we create meaning. So you can be doing a job that should be meaningful and get no meaning out of it because you're not reflecting. And when you don't reflect, you're not storing the meaning in your head. So it didn't really matter. If someone's like able to build the muscle, the skill to do reflection and to create meaning, they can be fulfilled doing anything. If someone doesn't have that skill, it doesn't matter what they do because they're not storing that in their fulfillment bank. Does that make sense? And the final myth I want to share is that purpose is a luxury. They're all connected, but that purpose is a luxury. You have to wait until you're at least a director, maybe vice president, before you're allowed fulfillment, right? You need to have a BMW and a yacht before you can worry about having fulfillment, right? This is such a common myth, and executives use it all the time, again, to say certain jobs, certain environments, fulfillment's not the issue. They're just trying to survive, right? This is so patronizing towards people. What we've seen is that it's often the people who have the lowest income, living in the poorest communities, that are actually more fulfilled than the people in an executive boardroom. The fundamental difference has to do with mindset and whether or not people have an abundance attitude or a scarcity attitude. And I think what often happens in a business environment is we get so detached from reality that it's unfulfilling, and that often the people who are sort of on the lower income side are actually more connected in many ways to reality, and therefore actually are more fulfilled. So this whole idea that we should, this is only a luxury, this is only for people once they have enough money, we're just finding is not statistically strong correlation. So then this sort of begs the question, okay, you've told me all these things that's not, like, what is it? So we already said, like, the number one thing is reflection. If you don't take time during your day to reflect, your job is not meaningful. And the problem today is that most of us are on social media, we're constantly have headphones in our ears, we're constantly working, and as a result of that, our lives, despite being busier than ever, making more of an impact than ever, are meaningless because we're not creating space to reflect. That is the number one problem I've seen in the workforce, is that we're squeezing, and in life, we're squeezing all the time for reflection out of our lives. And as companies, we're not actually building reflection time into work. And as a result, no matter how great the job is, it's not meaningful. So there are three things that create meaning at work. These are really the only three things. And what I love about these three things, I don't know how many of you have small children. A 5-year-old understands this. And I think in general, when it comes to people issues, if a 5-year-old doesn't understand it, it's probably not true. It needs to be that simple. Otherwise, it's intellectualization of where we are. Number one thing people need are meaningful relationships. If we don't have meaningful relationships at work, no matter how much impact we make, how much we grow, we are unfulfilled. A meaningful relationship is a relationship that's positive, consistent, and vulnerable. That's what creates a meaningful relationship. So if you think about your friends, a good friend is someone who's positive. Doesn't mean you don't complain all the time, but you find a way to move to, how am I going to do something about it? They're consistent. You don't talk to them once a year. You have like a regular rhythm of your relationship. And you're vulnerable, which doesn't mean you cry every time you talk. It just means you're authentic and real in the conversation. You're not trying to prove anything. You're just able to be yourself. If we don't have that at work, it's unfulfilling, no matter what you're doing. Second one is impact. We need to feel like the work we're doing matters to someone other than ourselves. Does not mean you have to solve climate change. If you solve climate change, God bless you, please do, that would be awesome. This literally just means you need to perceive, you don't even actually have to make an impact, you have to perceive that your work matters to someone else. And that could be as small as making someone smile, opening the door for somebody, helping someone's job get a little easier. You just have to feel like if I disappeared, I would be missed, and I'm doing work that actually matters to someone else. It's not about this big lofty thing. It's about day to day. Am I doing something I perceive matters? Or am I just fundamentally like invisible to the world? And then the final one is growth. We need to feel like we're constantly growing. If we don't feel like we're growing and being stretched, we again cannot be fulfilled. We can have amazing relationships, making a tremendous impact, but if we don't feel that growth, at a certain point, we're no longer fulfilled. We need that growth. And growth is not about reading more books. It's not about having more knowledge. Growth really is about personal growth. It's about being stretched out of your comfort zone and being forced to become a bigger person. Doing things you didn't know you could do. Doing things that scare you. If you don't have that regularly in your work, you're not growing and you're not going to be fulfilled even with these things. So just to reinforce this, a lot of this is tied back to our origins as a species, right? As human beings many thousands of years ago, these are all the way our brain was wired for us to survive. Because in nature, picture yourself like, wandering Africa thousands and thousands of years ago, the number one predictor of survival was whether or not you were in a tribe. If you're on your own, you're dead. You need people around you to survive as a human being in nature. So our brains were developed to make us feel very unhappy when we're not around other people. Impact, if we don't perceive that the tribe finds value in us, we're the one that's going to get kicked out. That's a threat to us. We need to always perceive that the tribe wants us to stay inside of the tribe so that we feel comfortable. And then growth was like, in an environment where we don't have technology, et cetera, we need to be able to constantly adapt to changing climate, changing environment. And therefore, if people don't have the ability to grow and don't feel like they're growing, they worry about whether they'll stay relevant. So we actually are wired to actually need these things, which is why this is so authentically real, because our computer inside our brain is making it this way. So we're going to talk a little bit about how do we go about starting to discover what purpose means for us. And I'm really excited to share this exercise you're going to do with each other to begin this journey. We have a full-on half-day workshop that we do with people to really get to what is your purpose, what brings meaning to you. But we wanted to give you a little bit of a flavor of what this looks like, especially as you think about how would you operationalize this into your organization. How could you build reflection? How could you build connection? And how can you build self-awareness into your culture? The key of this is really shifting from a transactional mindset to much more of a purpose mindset. And at the core of a purpose mindset is the belief that I can create meaning, and it's my responsibility to create meaning. I have control over sort of how I want to show up in the world. This is fundamentally different than transactional mindset. Transactional mindset fundamentally is like life is a game. There's a scarcity mindset. There's winners, there's losers. I am defined by my job, not by my purpose, et cetera. It's really about shifting people more to a purpose mindset and building a culture around that mindset. Let's see. Okay, your turn. You ready? People feel like you're ready for purpose? You sure? All right. You got 20 minutes to find purpose. If you don't find it in that 20 minutes, you're screwed, you're done. So what we're gonna ask you to do is to get with a partner, someone else in the room next to you, And in your papers, you'll see there's a worksheet that has 4 questions. And we're going to give you 20 minutes. I want to give you a few instructions on how to do this so that it's as impactful for you as possible. The key thing here is you're not taking notes for yourself. You're going to take the notes for your partner. So they're going to share with you their answers. You're writing it down. So you're forced to listen to what they actually had to say. Otherwise, we find people don't listen to each other. We're so bad at listening, unless we take notes, we don't actually listen to each other. The second thing is, don't have one person answer all 4, and then go to the next person and answer all 4. Do question 1, both of you. Do question 2, both of you. Question 3, and see where that's going? Yeah. So you have 20 minutes just to basically coach each other, ask these questions, take notes for the other person, and we'll come back in 20 minutes. But I'm excited to feel the energy and to see what comes out of it. And I just encourage you all, we're in a small room. It can get noisy, so just try to use your voices with each other, recognizing that we're in a room with a lot of people. So, and if anybody needs a partner, we will find you one. So let the purpose be with you. It's amazing how much power there is in just having a real conversation with somebody. Just that power gives you so much lift. And we've lost, I think, a lot of the skills to do that. So I love watching the energy in the room as people actually connect, they see each other, they appreciate each other, they understand and have empathy. It's so, so powerful. So a big reason why we asked you to do this is for your own growth, but it's also, as you just shared, this is really the key, and it's this simple, to really building a culture where people are fulfilled. And it's not necessarily a manager, but that's sort of the most common model. But if you just simply train your leaders, your managers, to check in on these 3 questions of how are your relationships? Do you feel like you're making an impact? Do you feel like you're growing? And what are you, on each of those, going to do to make that part better? I'm not going to do anything as a manager. I'm not going to do that. What are you going to do to strengthen relationships? What are you going to do to make more of an impact? What are you going to do to grow? If you have those conversations regularly with your team, with each other, it changes their lives and it changes the whole culture of the organization. And that's really at the core of the work that we're doing. And it's at the core of the idea of coaching versus traditional management. Coaching is about asking the questions that enable people to be self-aware, take ownership, and bring the best of themselves forward, versus the traditional model, which is giving advice. No one wants advice from you on which relationships you should have or what you should be doing. You all know the answers. We've seen this over and over again. What people need are the questions and the conversations that help them realize and own it themselves. Does that make sense? So what we've been doing is really building the curriculum for people to be able to discover their purpose, get more aware of this, but then do manager training to really help people develop the skills and practice just having these simple conversations that transform the culture of their teams and organizations. This idea of like a leader as a coach. And it doesn't have to require 10 years of certification of coaching. We just believe asking these 3 questions about relationships, impact, and growth over and over and over again builds that change in people, teams, and organizations. So, let's see. So, I really hope, when I hand it over to Chris, but I think if you take anything away from this, I hope a couple things. One, if people are aware of their purpose and they take ownership of it, they're much more likely to be fulfilled. Your job is not to make them fulfilled. Your job is to help them have the couple skills and tools to help them do it. Reflection is the only way that we actually create meaning. And if you're not creating space for reflection, it doesn't matter what you do in the organization. Third is relationships impact growth. Relationships impact growth. And relationships, I'd say, is the most important one. If people don't feel that sense of support and connection, The other two don't really matter all that much. So if you only focus on one thing, it's like, how can you actually build true human connection? I think we've built a workplace for human doings, and we need to build one for human beings. All we do is focus on activity, and without enabling and honoring the being, we're never going to create the space for fulfillment. So I'm going to close it just, again, challenging you. The people in this room can change the culture of your companies, the city, this country, simply by enabling these questions to be asked once a week in your organizations of each other. That simple thing can change the world, and you have the ability to create that change. So thank you in advance for the courage for sort of even considering being part of that change with us. So just really want to encourage you to sort of think about your life going forward and the choice you have about like investing a couple hours and like really understanding who you are, and to think about the you that opens that door versus the you that ignores that door. And I think it's a very, very simple thing to do, just to give up a couple hours to come to one of these workshops, to really just invest in yourself. And we're doing it for you because we know that once you open that door, you're going to want to open the door for 1,000 people. So you're our guest for that, and just really think about like, what is the choice not to do that? And what is that saying to yourself? What is that saying about what you believe in yourself and what you're capable of doing? And just again, want to thank you all for being part of this movement to change humanity, because God damn it, we need to do that right now because we are a mess. But this is how we create the change. So thank you.